This is Recovery Lifestyles with Carmel. Here at Recovery Lifestyles, we are committed to raising awareness and ending stigmas surrounding addiction and mental health. On today's show, I'll be speaking with Stephanie Starr, who is a mindset, life, and business coach for women. She is passionate about helping women gain clarity on their values and creating a business that truly supports the freedom and lifestyle they desire. Through a balance of woohoo and proven actionable to-do strategies, she coaches women on mindset, money, mentality, niche, and branding, social media growth, content creation, and more. And when she's not coaching, she's enjoying quality time with her 5-year-old daughter, friends, and family, or doing yoga, reading, writing, practicing meditation, exploring nature, and traveling the world. So Stephanie, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Carmel. It's so good to see you.
This is really, I don't know, I found this really cool and exciting that you and I mean, we know each other from many, many years ago, many moons ago, when we were both involved in, the nightclub scene and living that path. And it's so cool to fast forward now, at least 15 years now. We don't want to age ourselves because we do look young still, right?
Of course.
But to be here in this space today and be both on a very similar path, coaching women, being trailblazers in our world. And so, Steph, would you like to share with the audience briefly a little bit about who you are and your story?
Okay, so I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, to a 17-year-old mother that gave me up for adoption. I was then adopted into a Roman Catholic family that I was fortunate to be adopted to. I grew up on Vancouver Island. I was very naughty in my teenage years, very rebellious, and went through my 20s as a dancer, but reconnected to my spiritual self. And now I am a mother to an amazing 5-year-old little girl, and I coach women on mindset and business.
Awesome. So I want to dig a little bit deeper. I want to get into the good stuff because this is Recovery Lifestyles, and we're about digging deep and about sharing with our audience who we were and where we really came from. And you have such an inspiring story. You really have and are an example of someone who is an overcomer. So how old were you when you kind of started being, as you said, naughty?
When I was 13 years old, I started letting curiosity and the wrong kind of people guide me down a pretty crazy path.
And did that path lead to drugs and alcohol?
It led to everything.
Yeah,
Definitely. It led me over to the big city of Vancouver, which seemed all exciting when I was 13, hanging out with older people, experiencing pretty much every drug experience we could get our hands on, sneaking into nightclubs, you name it.
Yeah, 13 is such a young age. I can't imagine, being a parent today, and I'm sure you as well. At 13, you're still so vulnerable and innocent.
Yeah, so I had gotten myself into some trouble in my hometown. Just being a bad kid, we were doing B&Es and stuff, basically out of boredom growing up in a small town. So I had the police looking for me, and that scared me. And a friend of mine invited me to go over to this party in Vancouver. So I didn't consciously run away from home, but the longer I was gone, the harder and scarier it was to turn around and go back. I knew that I to them, and I was afraid to go back and see their faces and see the sorrow that I knew I was creating. So it was easier to just keep getting high and keep running away from it all.
Right. And so what did that lead you down? I'm just trying to pull out of you a little bit more of your story.
Yeah. Well, it started with, hey, let's drop some acid and take the ferry over to Vancouver. Vancouver and just kind of roaming around the streets. And we ended up broke. So we ended up panhandling, and we ended up meeting other panhandlers and hanging out with older people who then were introducing us to new drugs and taking us into nightclubs. And all of a sudden this became this like cool, exciting lifestyle. You know, I felt so growing up that I was kind of on my own. And even though we were panhandling, we were making money. And like 12 of us sleeping in a 2-bedroom apartment. And yeah, but it was, I mean, it's crazy to look back now. At the time I felt so grown up, but now when I see 13-year-olds, I mean, it wasn't really actually until these recent years of therapy that I really started to grasp how much of a child I really was. I was a child that those 20-something-year-old men were,
right,
you know, getting high and wheeling me in and convincing me to stay with them, and that you're, you know, this is where you belong kind of thing. So yeah.
So what was it? What was the turning point for you? What made you start to change your life?
Well, after being on the streets for a few months, I actually had ran into a girlfriend of one of my brothers, and she was like, your family is torn apart. Like, you need to go home. You know, they had the missing children file open and police like actively looking for me. But I guess after 3 months, they kind of give up. Like and this is the time when Picton was happening in Vancouver, when all those prostitutes and such were being abducted. And so there was a lot of women going missing off the streets. So all the scariest things were going through their heads. And she said, you know, you need to go home. And I knew that I was facing some jail time by that time. So I actually went to a youth outreach worker and kind of fessed up. And crazy enough, she knew exactly who I was as soon as I said my name. And she convinced me to go home. I ended up doing a little bit of time over Christmas, New Year's, and my birthday in juvenile detention. Which was a crazy journey on its own. But then when I got out of juvie, I just couldn't go back to, like, I wasn't that sweet little girl and everything was forever awkward in that home, right? Like, I felt so much shame. My mother could barely look at me. It was uncomfortable for everyone. And when I came out of all of that, I was really heavy into like the punk rock metal world. And I think out of shame and guilt and a sense that I didn't belong, which being adopted, I never really did. I shaved a mohawk into my head and I went deep into this sort of underground world of not wanting to fit in and not wanting to be viewed as feminine, not wanting to be a part of society. And I ended up moving out of my parents' house at only 15, getting a part-time job. I still went to school. I managed to go to school, but I was living with guys that were in their mid-20s selling drugs. And did that for a while. And then actually their house got like raided, and I managed to get out, but it was pretty clear that the people I was living with owed a lot of money to the wrong people. And it was a pretty scary situation. So one of the guys who actually really cared about me said, you know, you got to get out of this situation. They're after your boyfriend and your boyfriend cares about you. And I'm worried that they might come for you. Here's a bag of weed and some money. This person's going to take you to Calgary. We stuck our thumbs out. We stuck our thumbs out and hitchhiked to Calgary. And a friend of mine and her brothers let me stay with them. And I ended up kind of illegally working in punk bars and stuff for a while until I hit 18. And then I went and I met a girl who said, you know, I was working at a clothing store. I was working at Garage Clothing, and I was pouring beers on tap at a punk bar. And a girl said to me, you know, you could make a lot of money dancing. I went and did some wet tea competitions, got approached by an agent, and I ended up being a dancer. I ended up stripping. Ironically, stripping tends to take a lot of women down. That industry is filled with all kinds of drugs and chaos. But strangely, that's where I started to find myself. That's where I started to grow some confidence. That's where I started to reconnect back to my femininity. And around 21, 22, I started to read self-help books. I found Dr. Wayne Dyer. I found Marianne Williamson. I started to read all that stuff and really connected to it. Like my mind was blown. I was like, this is everything I've always felt, but somebody's putting it into words for me. So I started kind of reconnecting back to myself and spirit and doing a lot of inner work. Somebody introduced me to yoga. And then that's when it all kind of started to turn around. And I think my recovery process began. Mm-hmm. It took a lot of time. But somehow through, I believe, harnessing my feminine power and starting to get myself around the right people, I just started to change.
Yeah. Well, and I can hear that as I'm listening to your story. You know, you definitely have been guided and led by, we could say, a power greater than yourself because of all of the situations you were in. And it was almost like little angels, like the guy who gave you the bag of weed, even though he gave you a bag of weed. You never know. Maybe angels give bags of weed out. I highly doubt it, but you know, it's very cool to hear you share your story and how all the dots and how they were all connected. So I want to just back up for a minute and talk a little bit about that. You know, you call it harnessing your feminine power, and that's how you started to step into who you really were. What was it that, you know, made you recognize that? Because this is not something that I hear, I'm sure you hear as well, from just somebody who had a bad childhood or somebody from the punk world or somebody who is, you know, this is a situation with, you know, housewives, people, just regular everyday people and successful people as well. I don't want to not include anybody, but where they lose their sense of femininity. And why do you think that happens? Like, in your experience, what was that turning point for you that helped you recognize it?
I think just through like meditation and self-love and self-growth exercises, I started to forgive myself and just really acknowledge and be okay with who I was, even though I wasn't this perfect child.
Yeah.
And I mean, dancing in a lot of ways did it for me. I went through some bad sexual experiences on the streets, as I'm sure you can imagine, things that go on when you're surrounded by older men and drugs and you're 13 and you're high and you just need a place to crash. So I gave away my sexual power at a very young age and believed it to not be my own. But something happened one day when I was on a stage. It's like I remember the moment. Some guy said something very rude and degrading to me. And I remember I was literally standing on stage, towering over him sitting down there. And I just had this moment of, you know what? I'm up here getting paid, owning my power, being brave, being courageous, getting paid to just be the raw, naked, beautiful, most purest form I can be. And you're sitting down there looking up at me, paying to observe my bravery and my courage and my natural beauty. And in that moment, that just clicked in my mind. And I went, wow, I've got some power here. One of the biggest things that really changed everything for me, though, was Marianne Williamson's book, A Return to Love.
That's a good moment. Yeah.
The moment that I realized that everything comes from love or fear. Every emotion, feeling, thought, words, action, it all comes from love or fear. I suddenly realized whenever anyone through my whole life, you know, anything that didn't feel loving, instead of taking it personally, I realized that it came from fear. So when that clicked, I had this massive moment of forgiveness for myself, for everyone that ever wronged me, for those men that abused me, for people that used me in any way, for people that lied to me, hurt me, for my mother who, you know, she lost her baby girl at 1 year old and then adopted me. And I grew up feeling like I could never fill that void and I was never good enough for her love, which I think kind of molded me in a sense to be that perfect runaway, right? That perfect person to be abused and to get on drugs and all those things. But I just had this huge release in this moment of forgiveness because I realized that all of those things anyone had ever said or done or not said or done came from fear. So my anger turned into empathy.
Wow. That, you know what, that is so powerful. And I know, and I just trust that there's somebody out there listening that needed to hear that, because that right there, that's life transforming and powerful. And so I just honor you and I thank you, you know, for being vulnerable and sharing this, because not many people would want to get on to, you know, on here live and share like, I was a stripper, right? Like that's pretty, you know, but I think we're going to help change societal views on that as well, because it's not this horrible thing, right? For many women, it's a learning process and it's a growth process. And yes, it does take many people down, women down, as you had said, but it also really empowers many as well. So thank you for that step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I know you know, so how long have you been in the recovery process now, would you say?
Oh, geez, you know, I haven't even actually put a number on it. It's been years. It's been years and years. I had my daughter, she'll be 6 in July. And luckily, before I got pregnant, I had decided to leave the dancing industry and I came to Kelowna to go to university for psychology because I was determined to be the psychologist that was going to change lives. Because therapy did so much for me. It was so transforming and I still go to therapy. I'll probably be a lifer. I think everyone could use it.
I hear you.
Yeah, right? And I came here to a place where I didn't know anyone, and I consciously did that because I really wanted to commit to working on me. So my goal was study, yoga, meditate, eat, sleep. That's hang at the beach. That's all I came here to do. And so with that move, I was also leaving a 6-year relationship that had, the last 2 years were pretty toxic. So I literally just decided enough is enough. It's time to honor and love myself the way I deserve to be. I started being very conscious of what I put into my body. I started being very conscious of, I did a whole environmental detox. People I didn't need anymore. I didn't watch shows full of murder, blood anymore. I mean, I used to fall asleep to Netflix shows that were crazy stuff was going on, right? I just decided to put myself in a really good place. And what's funny is when I was about 24, I saw a psychic in Calgary and she told me, no, I was 24 or 25. And she said, in 6 years, you're going to have a baby girl. She's waiting for you to be in a good place. And I laughed and I said, oh, I'm never having children. I'd rather have designer denim.
You know, it's so funny because I actually remember I was like with you at that time. I remember you going to see that psychic and you coming back and saying like, this crazy lady says I'm going to have a daughter. You didn't even, I don't think you even wanted kids at that time. That was just not a part of your journey.
At any time. Yeah. I always related so much to Eat, Pray, Love because I literally was that girl that had that box full of all the places in the world I was going to go to while all the other little girls were planning their weddings. I was like, nah, I'll be in Greece when you get married.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, and then that summer when I came to Kelowna and I was going to university and I was doing the self-love thing, I had actually a dancer that I used to dance with lived here, and she kept inviting me onto this yacht full of hot guys, and I kept, no, that's not what I'm here for. I ended up going. I ended up falling for the gorgeous, charming man, and I ended up getting pregnant. and that was my little girl. So I'm grateful that I had just really consciously made this choice to put myself in a good place, to treat my body well. And it's crazy because it's like the second I made that choice, her spirit was like, oh, okay, I'm coming now. You ready? I'm coming.
And I think it's funny that you're like, we have to almost have a picture of your little girl here, because she does. She looks like an angel. She's just blonde and big blue eyes and so sweet and innocent looking. I mean, she is, but yeah. What a blessing.
Yeah. So yeah, she is my little angel, and she's the best thing that ever happened. But it is crazy to think I have a girlfriend whose daughter just turned 10, and we were just talking the other night actually about like sometimes it still hits me, and I realize, in only 3 years, in the blink of an eye, her daughter's going to be 13. And then we were like, think about the things we were doing at 13. And it just really hits, because when you are that young person, you just don't realize, it wasn't like, I'm still coming to realization of how much of a child I was,
right? And
how scary that was to think, to pick up a 13-year-old girl that came from a relatively good sheltered home and just plunk her on Hastings right now and leave her open to the feasting for all the weirdos down there. I mean, that's pretty crazy. But in all honesty, something I want to bring awareness to is as educating children, because I will never sugarcoat anything for my daughter, because had someone explained to me what men really want when they're getting you drunk, not all men, but had my parents ever spoke to me about drugs, about the things that are going on in the streets in the big city, about the ways that people will take advantage of you, I knew none of it. I was not prepped. I was just curious and naive and thought that I could trust everyone and that nothing bad would happen to me. So, when I look at my own little girl, I just think, mommy ain't going to raise no dummy. Like, she's going to know. We're going to have those hard, uncomfortable conversations, because I'm going to be the one to educate her about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, not some 25-year-old horny drug addict.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And when you put it in that mind, like in that frame, wow, so
yeah.
Well, we got to start wrapping it up, but is there anything else that's on your heart that you would really just love to share with the audience?
I think anyone going through a recovery process, I think that, or knowing someone who is, I think forgiveness is a massive, massive part of it. I think that once you can forgive yourself and forgive everyone that wronged you is when the path to recovery really can begin on a spiritual, energetic, and emotional level.
Yeah.
I'm really an advocate for educating women, children, young females about what's out there, and therapy. I think even if you think you've got it all together, I think therapy is. I think we all need therapy these days. So do the inner work, and get yourself around good people. I realized that every stage of my life, I literally have become the 5 people I've spent my time with. So yeah, awesome. So that's really huge.
So, and if people or anybody out there listening would like to connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on social media all the time. They can find me at Stephanie Starr. They can email me at steph@soulignitions.com. I have a Facebook group called Soul Ignitions, full of awesome, amazing, spiritual yet badass women, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, moms. I love connecting with people there. And my website, www.soulignitions.com, is about to be busted out to the world. It's in the making, but it'll be out there.
Awesome. So I'll also have a couple of your links under this video. So if anybody, is just moved by what you're sharing or wants to connect with you or even wants to go ahead and work with you, I'll have that all available. And again, Stephanie, thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for taking the time to share, because I believe when we share our stories, that's where the power's at. So.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Carmel.